Welcome to The Gap, where it's our mission to bridge the gap between training and on-field performance.
I'm Brett Hart, owner of Hitman Performance.
And I'm Dan Labadia, the owner of Jack Javelin.
Hope you guys enjoy the show.
All right, welcome to this episode of The Gap. We got a special guest on, Joe Pedulla. So today, one thing that we really wanted to highlight with Joe was just a little bit about his background and how his coaching mentorship program, Pragmatic Principles Mentorship, is a big piece of what he's doing, not only blending the athletic performance and sports performance side of things, but with that mentorship aspect as well. So Joe, thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you guys having me.
So just going into that, with that Pragmatic Principles Mentorship, like how did you come up with that name and what does that mean to you?
This all started in a staff meeting with my strength staff at Oklahoma. And, we all do continuing education. And my first fall at the university, they had every strength coach present on a topic, and everybody was going through their philosophies, their training philosophies, and, how they approached their teams and the programming that they ran. And I titled mine Pragmatic Principles. And it just came to me out of nowhere. And the word pragmatic just came from boots on the ground, actionable plans, stuff that works in the real world, because we always try to employ things that we hear about, but they prove not effective in the environment that we're working in, or with the demographic that we have, or the time available. As NCAA coaches, our hands are tied sometimes with a lot of the time that we're allocated to get our job done. So you have to be very keen on what's effective for my situation. So I listed 15 principles out in that talk that I felt were necessary and required to run a good program at this level. And I presented on it. I thought it went pretty good. And then last summer, I kind of doubled down on it and I added about 10 more principles to it. I think I had 24 total principles that I spoke on in this 3-hour-long webinar that I posted last year, which I only sold for like $140, something like that. And people seemed to like it. And I thought, if people like this, they're going to love if I go, way deeper into each one, because I only spoke on each one for 10 to 12 minutes a piece. And it was really surface level and it was simple. And I think that's why people liked it. It was very simple, straight to the point, a lot of golden nuggets in that presentation. But I no longer sell that webinar. I took it down completely. And I started the mentorship. And the reason I started the mentorship was that I felt like stuff was lacking in a lot of the education that circulates our profession. I think one thing is a very tightly knit community. And you might mention like Strength Coach Network, which is a great platform. Like I've been a member of Strength Coach Network since 2020. But I think that something that it lacks is niche. And, I've been reading about business and listening to these people talk on YouTube about how to niche down. And I'm slowly learning that the niche is you. It's who you are. It's not really always your demographic or a population that you're targeting. It's what you like to talk about and who gravitates toward that message. And right now I'm in the early stages of building this thing, but the mentorship is basically 12 modules. And each module consists of 2 principles, and each one I talk on for about 45 minutes. And last night we just got done with a programming workshop where I had 20 people in a Zoom call, and we're all programming together. And unfortunately, most people don't join every live call, but we've got at least 80 people in the mentorship. I've got at least 125 people in the Discord community. So slowly trying to grow it. Slowly trying to add layers to it and make it more valuable for people. Like right now we have a programming critique channel where people can throw their programs up and we can talk about it, how to make it better based on the situation they're in. There's a interview prep and resume review section that's going to be developed. There's a Q&A section every single month starting in September. We're going to do a Q&A and also have a guest speaker on, some big names that I think are really innovative people. And I like that because sometimes you get on these educational platforms and it's either outdated information, You've got people out there that have already squashed a lot of the stuff that's been spoken about. Not that, things are just wrong inherently, but knowledge develops over time. So I'm trying to keep it fresh and updated. Um, I think another cool thing is there's a channel in that Discord where people can request content. Like, what do you want to know more about? You can request it, and I'll make you a presentation in, a week or 2 weeks time that speaks specifically to your issue and what you're dealing with and what you want to know more about. So the possibilities are endless, and it's in the early stages. I'm obviously adding a lot to it. It's been stressful, but it's been also been very rewarding, and I don't give myself enough credit for what I'm doing here. Like last night, I got off the call and I'm immediately criticizing how it went.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it was too long,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
was I condescending when I called out this person's idea and like challenged them on it? And then I think to myself, well, like these people are here to learn. And if they're here to learn, like they're probably okay with being told that they're wrong. So like I just do all this rationalizing in my head and criticizing, and it's imposter syndrome is what it is, to a degree. But I'm very excited about how it's going to grow, and I think the audience is going to give me the right direction on how it's supposed to grow and what they want and how they want to be served.
Absolutely. Do you know how long have you been doing this for? How long have you been coaching, I should say?
I've been coaching for coming on 5 years. I've been coaching full time since 2021, so this next year will be my fifth full time year. At this level, I'm entering my third year in the NCAA. Prior to that, I did 2 years with the Kansas City Royals, and I started in a small private sector facility. But the mentoring part, I mean, I've been answering questions on social media for years, but the demand has gone to a point where it has to become exclusive. So that's when I pivoted to the mentorship and the community in January. And I've been pretty much building the content for the course since November, and I'm still not done. I probably will never be done revising it and just adding new things based on what people want. And, you know, determining what the need is for our industry is really hard. Like an innovative need, like something that is not being offered but is going to attract a large volume of people is so hard to think about and actually isolate because there's so much information already out there. So it's just how do you separate yourself? And that's what I was saying before. I think the separator is myself, my personality, my willingness to help other people. Um, I said on my Instagram story the other day, like my responses are faster. I think I'm more detailed than a lot of people. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I think that's the value that I give people. I'm very detailed. I have a very short waiting time for me to get back to you. I try not to let a single DM go unread or unanswered. So I don't think a lot of communities can say that about the actual host of those communities and the people that own it and run it. I think a lot of these communities are just looking at people as numbers. And that's why I'm setting a cap on this thing next year, because it will exceed 100 people if I don't cap it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, going back to like the quality of it too, like, you want to keep it super high quality and keeping it at a cap of whatever your number ends up being, whether it's 100 or whatever, that's going to help you be able to service those people better. And going back to the imposter syndrome point, I think the longer you do it and the more testimonials and positive feedback you get and the more revisions you go through the course and just constantly go back and improvise and improve, that imposter syndrome is going to go away. And I think that that's normal when you are trying to find your next avenue in your coaching career, because I know I was in that point a couple of years ago where I was coaching youth kids, and then I was coaching adults, and then I was coaching high school athletes, and then I was coaching at the college and coaching javelin throwers, and I had no idea what my niche was. And then as I continued to go on, I just posted a lot of lifting stuff, I posted a lot of mobility stuff, and I posted a lot of javelin stuff, and eventually that audience just gravitated towards me, and I was able to just go full swing and just all in on the Jack Javelin brand and what Brett and I have been doing here with the podcast the last 2 years. So that niche will continue to find you and find like-minded people. Even for me, the reason I followed you is because you had that post of you doing the power cleans talking about your sales page and your sales letter and how you stayed up till 2 a.m. trying to record it. And Brett and I both texted each other. I was like, dude, you got to look at this. Like, this is so funny because it's just so relatable for us to like have that. Yeah, we're working all day, coaching people all day long. And then we're trying to get our lifts in and still, train at a high level. And then you have this business side of it that not a whole lot of people talk about as well. So it's just like, even, I mean, looking at it that, like, you got two guys right here that literally gravitated towards you because of what you're doing. And that's how your niche is going to grow.
I thought it was really funny how that post caught traction. Like sometimes on Instagram, it'll say like so and so started following you from your reel. And I like to click it to see what reel it was.
Yeah.
And every single one was that post. And I'm like, I didn't expect that reel to hit, but I guess, what you're saying, like it's relatable. And that's kind of what I'm getting at is in a profession like ours, relatability is so huge because it's a very personal profession. You know what I mean? It's a business of working with people and building relationships. And that's another thing that I think will separate your product. If someone just likes you more than someone else, that's good business. You're going to win that person over, and they're going to care enough about you because you've taken the time to care about them to where they're going to offer like criticism to make it better and help you along the way. And that's kind of what I feel from a lot of the people that are in this mentorship. And I got to shout out my friend Albino Neto. He was just an intern down at Texas Christian University, and now he's up at Endicott in Massachusetts. But he's been a longtime friend of mine, and I'll call him after some of these presentations, and I'm asking him for some criticism, and he's like, "Dude, you need to just chill out. Like it's good. Like you're going to get good feedback as you go. Just trust the whole process." And that's been reassuring. But yeah, relatability is massive.
Dude, something I really liked about obviously that post, I'm pretty sure I was one of the guys that followed you from that reel too, just because of
Yeah, you were.
Yeah, it was so funny. It was just, I literally told Dan that the next day when he called me. I was like, that post is hilarious. But something to go back on your mentorship program and like the community you're building, I think a lot of young coaches really will gravitate towards that. Because Dan, I don't know if you felt like this, but I did, working in the private sector, doing all those hours, and you don't know who to trust online, or you have a lot of information overload. I think having a community and almost like a tribe sense just helps build up the morale and helps go through those really long weeks of 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks. Pay's not exactly where you want it to be. You have a bigger vision of what you want to do later on with your life and your career. Do I go all fully remote? Do I stay in person? Like you don't, and then on top of that, learning all the strength and conditioning principles on top of it and coming out of school. So I think that's great what you're doing, the community. And I think a lot of people coming up and current and former strength coaches are going to find a lot of benefit out of it.
Yeah, the one thing that concerns me though about the whole, like the thing as a whole is like what level of strength coach is this going to serve? Because I think a lot of people from the outside, like the optics looking in, where it's like, okay, young new coaches are buying this product, like, and a lot of course sellers are scam artists and they're con artists. Like, I'm just going to sell a really impressionable person who's not experienced and doesn't have skin in the game something because they're impressionable, and we're going to target impressionable people. Like, this is why in some companies, like the best salesmen are assigned to like the hardest clients to acquire. And then like the worst salesmen are told to call the easiest leads. Because like, why would you waste your bullets on easy leads, and you have your worst salesman selling to your hardest clients to acquire? So like I'm trying to make it to where it's true value. And it probably already is, but it's just like in my head, I'm like, no, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Like, what's going to make someone like a minor league strength and conditioning coordinator feel like they need to be involved in this? You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to really serve the highest level of coaches as well, somehow, some way, one day. So that's another thing I struggle with as well.
Well, if you were a young, I mean, we're all young strength coaches at a certain point, and now kind of being in that seat of influencing younger guys or girls coming up, who would you say would be your biggest influences in your coaching career?
Oh man, I have a lot. I mean, I think Zach Dakin's my number one.
He was up there for me in college. I read his stuff a lot.
He was my number one. I mean, he was the first person that really trusted me with an internship in strength and conditioning. That was my first opportunity. There's another man named Jeff Hill who he's no longer a strength and conditioning coach, but he hired me for my first full-time job, and we had a lot of good times together. Um, but I think a lot of my resources have come from like honestly social media, YouTube, and webinars. Like I'm a huge fan of Will Rattel. I'm a huge fan of Mladen Jovanovic. I love Verkashansky. I like Dr. Yesus. I like some of Boyle's stuff. I know some people talk crap about Boyle. Like I used to like a lot of Boyle stuff. I still feel like I have some principles from him. The tier system was a big one. Joe Ken. I've taken a lot of principles from Cal Dietz. I think the more recent triphasic era is a little out there. I still have to learn a lot about it, but
Good luck. I still have no idea what's going on. I read his book twice.
I owe a ton of credit to my Royal staff as well. They taught me everything I needed to know about force plates, GPS. That job taught me so many boots on the ground practical skills. It's not even funny. I had to get out because I wanted to have a family one day. You know, thank God I actually met a woman down here in Oklahoma and we're getting married next month. So it
Wow.
worked out perfectly.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I got a lot going on. Thank you. But like I've always said to young strength coaches who are thinking about going into pro ball, like do it because now's the time and you're going to learn so many practical skills. Like how do you train guys that are playing 6 games a week? How do you train guys that are at the baseball stadium for 10 hours a day? How do you train guys on the road with limited equipment? You've got 2 sets of power blocks, a medicine ball, and Jaeger bands. Like, what are you going to do? So having those constraints put on me has been, one of the greatest things that could have ever happened to me. So I'm a huge fan of being a minor league strength coach, even though I feel like it might not be sustainable for a lot of people, myself included. But just the things that I was tasked with, the problems I had to solve have definitely proven to be worthwhile in going through.
I mean, I've thought about that too in my life because, from 23 to 25, I was working in the private sector and I wasn't specifically all in on the javelin niche yet, even though I was doing it part-time. And there's been times where I thought, oh, if I had started this at 23, I would be so much further along now at 26. But then I think back to all of those skills that I developed from 23 to 25, working in the private sector, learning about the business of things, learning about how to be a good person and just treat the client or the athlete with respect and be personable and have conversations on the floor, and learning how to coach people when they have different injuries or movement restrictions if they're an adult or they're a young kid and they can't do certain things yet. So that was super, super helpful for me as well, that I feel like a lot of that stuff helped me carry over into, now doing my own thing full time. And one thing that I don't have, and I'm assuming you studied exercise science in college.
Kinesiology, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I studied history education. Actually, I was supposed to be a history teacher. And then I got my master's in business administration, and Brett was exercise science at Springfield. So one question that I have, because you talked a little bit about your mentorship program and how you are trying to have that continued education, but some things are touched up upon a lot. Some things are completely ignored. And then certain things are, you need to be pragmatic with them, like you said. So what exactly do you think is good about learning, like the CSCS type stuff versus that real world application? Is there a gray area there? Do you think it's black and white, and how have you used that?
I mean, you have to start somewhere. You have to start with some level of foundational knowledge for you to actually build on it. And I have to be very careful with interns because I run our internship program at Oklahoma as well. And I catch myself being way too complicated. And to actually construct innovative thoughts and build on things, you have to start with the absolute most basic information. So I call it a necessary evil. Like when I finished the CSCS, I was like, okay, now I can read all these more intricate things and learn more hands-on skills and read stuff that actually is going to make a impact, like a tangible impact. So I've got nothing against like foundational knowledge. I think there's a lot of good things in the CSCS, like basics of periodization, basics of muscle physiology. You should understand that stuff. You should understand that stuff to where if someone comes out with a new thought on it or how to apply it, you're able to actually interpret the information and know what they're talking about. So everyone starts somewhere. I've got nothing against it. I think it's, like I said, a necessary evil. But while you're taking that information in and studying for it, like you should be trying to diversify as much as you can and get different opinions and kind of outsource your knowledge as well, or your education from other people too, to kind of blend like I call it the objective and the subjective, right? Like that's always the thing that we're balancing when we're administering programs and coaching is what has scientific merit, what's been objectively curated as something that works, and what are some subjective like phenomenological things that you've been able to acquire over time that suggest that things can be better or that something is maybe a little wrong, like something that I criticize a lot is periodization models in season for baseball and softball. Personally, at this stage, it's you should ignore them. You can't run a structured periodized program in the collegiate setting in baseball and softball because whenever you have time with the athletes, you're going to be in season. And even if you do have time with the athletes, but you're not in season, they're taking final exams. So it's a voluntary training period anyway. Now, if I were in the private sector and I had guys that were coming to me during like a major league or minor league off season, maybe I would utilize some intricate periodization strategies with maybe an advanced guy who's got a really serious training base and needs more variation. But for 99% of the team sport athletes we're going to see at our level, it's a complete afterthought for me. It's not what I'm concerned with. What I'm concerned with is consistency, making sure that they're training hard, routinely, and that they're making progress. And that's pretty much it. And in my course, I go into like serious detail, but then like when it's actually writing the programs, it's actually a very easy, streamlined process. Once you have the thinking concepts in mind, like when I periodize for my teams, it's when are the competitions? When are our most difficult competitions? I treat every single week as its own week. Like I treat every week like its own program. And I program in sprints. I program in 1 to 2 week cycles. I don't program 4 to 5, 6 week cycles. I might have a brand new sheet for every 2 weeks because every single team that you play each conference weekend poses a new challenge. Um, you might have to prepare for a team that bunts and runs a lot, or they play a lot of small ball. So now your team is on the field in defensive practice, sprinting all around the infield for 3 hours straight, trying to work on like tactical preparation for a team that's going to try to beat us in a very specific way. Now you have to adjust your program because of the amount of time on feet, the amount of accelerations you observed, the amount of decelerations that they sustained during that practice. Like stuff like that I'm looking at, and I'm at practice kind of taking in everything and deciding like what needs to be pruned or modified in the program based on that. If we have a midweek opponent that I know we're going to beat, you can play a little sore, a little fatigued, especially if it's early in the season, right? You're trying to survive a 5 to 6 month long season. You better be training hard for as long as you can. But I think a lot of coaches are like, oh, we're in season now, so we're just going to change everything and go to a lighter in-season program. And that's not smart because you're going to peak early. And you want to try to delay that peak as late as you possibly can. And everybody's schedule is different. Everyone's athletes are different. So it's really hard to write objective information on how to do that in a textbook. So that's kind of where I stand on that particular topic. I mean, I could speak on a lot of different things in the CSCS that I don't think are entirely applicable to team sport real world training, but that's just one example.
I mean, all I was thinking about there was, I don't know if you heard Rattel speak on it, but like in order to think outside the box, you should probably know what the box is. It's like you have to be in the box first before you can actually go out. So when I have young kids come, like we've had college interns when I was working in the private sector, and they're wanted to know more about Cal Dietz or Jay Schroeder, extreme isometrics, like the crazy stuff on Instagram that people see that gets a lot of views, rightfully so. It's very advanced and looks really sick, but they don't know anything about what's inside the textbook or what they're learning in school. So trying to just peel them back a little bit and bring them back a couple steps, being like, you're 10 miles out of where you're supposed to be right now. Like, keep your feet here and just, one, know all the kids in the weight room and know their names and know what sport they play. And then two, make sure they're doing everything right. And I think with the social media age, you definitely get that more outside view of seeing things that you want to do, but it's hard to discern. I mean, I fell into the trap too of wanting to do everything with what you got, but you don't even know what you have to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Will hit the nail on the head with that comment. You got to know the box. Like, so I can give you a good example right now, and I'm presenting on this next week in the mentorship is my opinion of power. And I criticize like the VBT power zones all the time on my Instagram, like strength, speed, strength, starting strength being kind of these made up qualities. I personally believe that it's all general strength at the end of the day, because it's a voluntary muscle action. It's the mechanisms of how force is produced in a lift are very different than like a quick interaction with the ground. So the criticism with the zones, people will say like we're surfing the curve, right? We're going to stay in the accelerative strength zone for a while, then we're going to go to strength speed, then we're going to go to speed strength. But what Daniel Bach lays out in this video that he put out a couple months ago is that the force velocity curve is not meant to have different exercises sitting on different places on the curve. And he said something really interesting about like looking at a specific movement. Like if you're looking at the quads, the force velocity curve is meant to describe what's happening at the muscle. It's not meant to describe the entire body or all muscles that are involved in a movement. Like if you're sprinting, there's going to be a time during your sprint where the hamstrings are activated maximally, but then there's going to be a phase of that sprint where they're not activated so maximally. So if you look at the quads, an example that Dan lays out, if you're doing a seated jump, assuming you're doing maximal effort jumping, the second you leave that box, you're going to be at F0, like the very top of the curve where the y-intercept is. And there's going to be a brief like isometric phase where the slack is pulled out of your muscles so that they can actually pull on bone. Then you're going to go down, and then when you leave the box and you shoot off the ground, you're going to be at V max. Like your velocity is going to be tapped out. So in that movement alone, you've surfed the curve. In a sprint, when you're at the terminal swing phase, right, the force velocity curve has an eccentric side too. It'll go across, down, and then down across into the concentric muscle shortening side. At terminal swing, you're going to be on that negative side peak force. And then there's going to be a brief moment where the hamstring's acting isometrically. As the knee's extending and the hip is extending, the muscle length is not going to change. Some people speculate that that's what's happening at the hamstring. And then the tendon's going to bear a lot of that load when it hits the ground. So when it hits the ground, you might be at F max, and then you're going to surf down again when you push and that hamstring shortens at max velocity, the maximal speed that it's able to shorten at. And that's a pretty advanced concept, I feel like, for some people to think about after they've, for years and years and years, been told that sprinting is down here on the Vmax side. But looking at that, it doesn't make any sense, right? You see all these posts where the soleus and the gastroc and the hamstring are experiencing 8 to 9 times body weight with every ground contact. But then you look at a force velocity curve chart, and you got sprinting at the very bottom on the far right, and it's like sprinting's low force. Like that makes no sense.
Hmm.
So that's something I'm going to talk about next week is that idea. Um, but without an understanding of what the force velocity curve really is, what it's meant to describe, then how are you supposed to refute the claims made where like, okay, Olympic lifts sit right here, or maximal strength sits right here, or jumping is down here and sprinting's down here. Like it's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what I think that's really cool. Thank you so much for that explanation. I think that one thing that I've definitely experimented with as well, and what I saw you post about that I thought was a really good reminder for a lot of people was this idea of having that targeted focus certain days of the week, right? And so you were talking about how because your sprinting is so maximal and it's so, fatiguing and you're putting so much power into it that when you would go lift after, you would just have a crappy lift. And so you kind of have this idea where, you have these sprint days and plyometric days, but then you have these lifting days, and the days that are lifting are going to be a little bit more obviously geared towards lifting and building muscle and getting stronger. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you kind of came to that philosophy on your own, or if someone influenced you in a certain way?
Yeah. So in the video, I say you're going to get used to it if you sprint on one day and then you lift the next. But the opposite's also true. You can get used to sprinting and then lifting right after. And I do that with my athletes a lot. I do it with myself a lot. If I miss Monday's training session, for example, or my week gets jumbled up and I have to move things around, you can do it. But the post was meant to target people that I know, like most people are short on time. They can't train 3 hours a day. It's tough to go from the track or the turf into the weight room. Some people don't have the facilities that I do or we do, where like you can go sprint and then 5 minutes later you're in a gym.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have to drive around. So it's not practical for people all the time to do both in one day. And that's kind of how I arrived at it, is realizing like, sprinting is going to be neurologically taxing, but from a muscular standpoint, you can still get a good lift in the next day. And that's my whole take on readiness and like high-low training is like if you do a high day, the next low day, it's not about just recovering. It should be about what you can accomplish because you should be using those days to your advantage. And it's the same thing with doing speed work on Monday and lifting the next day. Like, can you still get a good lift in having sprinted the day before? And the answer oftentimes is yes. And I haven't had a situation where I've seen it like that isn't the case. Like lifting is definitely much slower rate of force development. The mechanisms for how you're producing force are a lot different. It's voluntary. It doesn't require as precise and coordinated timing of like pre-tension and co-contractions. Like it's not the same demand on your body and your CNS. So I arrived at it by just thinking to myself, like, I don't have enough time to do this usually, and I need to find a way to fit all this stuff in. So that's pretty much how I arrived at it. And I obviously look at like force plate testing, like what are my outputs today? I've actually found that my outputs on Tuesday are better than on Mondays. So I've actually thought about like taking Mondays off sometimes and doing something lighter and then doing speed and lifting on Tuesday as well. Because Mondays I'm kind of flat sometimes. I don't know why. But it's just mixing things around and finding what works for you. And that's what I feel like has worked best for me. And it's worked for a lot of people on my training team. It's worked for athletes that I have. We force plate test a lot, and I look at how the session yesterday impacted today. How fatigue is accumulating throughout the week. Like what do our Friday jumps look like compared to our Tuesday? Stuff like that. And I haven't really seen an indication that it's really hindering my lifts. And I feel like I can do more speed volume too. I can really drive that stimulus deeper. If I were to do both in one day, I probably don't have the time to do as much sprinting as I need to do to continue to get faster.
Yeah. That makes sense. I definitely understand that from the time constraint perspective. Something that I've talked about with some javelin coaches, actually, especially in the collegiate sector, has been how a lot of times kids or just anyone in general will typically lounge around a little bit more on the weekend or stay up later and sleep in later. So a lot of times their circadian rhythm gets thrown off going into Monday. So I know a lot of people that have treated Monday as like a static mobility day and maybe a lift, and then Tuesday will be like a sprint medicine ball plyometric day, and then Wednesday would be a higher effort javelin throwing day, for example, because you're almost treating it like, all right, if there's circadian rhythms thrown off and they're flat coming in on Mondays, you use that to kind of get into the groove, and then you go like high velocity output Tuesday, and then Wednesday is a good day for them to go, do that sport specific movement and try to, work the technique. Because like by that point, they should be alive enough in the week that they're ready to compete almost and be really primed, but they're not super dead like they would be on a Saturday.
I've done the same thing many times. Like when we get to the fall season, it's really tough to continue to like focus on speed development because you're doing a lot of running on the field. So in the summertime, usually my Mondays are acceleration focused with my teams. And then when we get to the fall practice season, I make that kind of that priming day that you're talking about. We'll do some mobility, we'll do some yielding ISOs, medicine ball throws, maybe some like light tempos or like change direction tempos or like traveling patterns, some vestibular stuff, things like that, just to get them to wake up a little bit. And like I call it like a shaking off the rust type of day.
Yeah.
Um, and then they're usually ready to rock on Tuesday. And I feel like the same thing would apply to in season as well when you're actually in your competitive season. Like we play on the weekends and we get back on Sunday nights, usually pretty late. And Monday is always an off day, usually. Uh, if you're playing in one of these big Power Four conferences and you play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday is usually your designated off day. If I were in charge of practice intensity in a given week like that, I would make Tuesday like a low to moderate. I would make Wednesday your high day. Like that's when you're going to do most of your tactical prep and most of your like higher CNS work. If you have like a drill bank of like everything you do as a team and a program, you're going to do your most demanding stuff on that day. And then Thursday might be like video, you're going to do tactical preparation, right? You're going to come up with a game plan for the pitcher that you're facing tomorrow. So if you're the LSU Tigers going into the World Series and you're planning on playing Coastal Carolina, like it's like a session like that. We're going to study film on this guy. Like that's what you're doing on Thursday. And then Friday you got the game. So I think the same thing applies for in season, especially because you're traveling, you might have jet lag coming from a different time zone, sleeping in, not your own bed. Like I think that stuff comes in even more handy during the competitive season for sure.
I mean, yeah, a lot of factors that I think a lot of people take for granted. I don't think a lot of people realize just how many things you try to juggle, especially in season with all the traveling and different opponents you have to prepare for. Makes it a lot harder. I mean, I know for my football guys that I used to train, I just made Monday the upper body day because, one, I knew they liked to party a lot on the weekends. So if I gave them that bench day that I know they would all love, hopefully they would tone it back just a little bit. And then Tuesday was the sprint and lift day just because we had 4 days a week of training with them. So had to make sure we got both in. But ideally, that would have been like an hour and a half session, but we tried to cram it all in an hour.
Yeah, I mean that's like the art of coaching right there. It is like deciding, like picking what you're going to do also because your team likes it, within reason, just to
Mhm.
keep them motivated and move around your schedule a little bit to make that happen. And I've done that many times with things. It's a great idea.
So I was listening to one of your podcasts with Bryce Kreider earlier today, and you were talking a little bit about the tread athletics and how they wrote a blog post or something on the yips and how that kind of went into that lack of kinesthetic awareness and stuff like that. So you could correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I mean, a lot of times what Brett and I have talked about is those athletes that are a little bit less elite typically are overthinkers, and then the people that are the best are going to be really loose and relaxed and just be confident that they're the best. So do you ever see any correlation there, in terms of like, I mean, I know you're not like a baseball coach, but do you ever see that with your athletes in terms of someone who's an overthinker and not as talented having more of the yips, and then you could also talk a little bit about what the yips are for people that don't know, and then versus having someone that's more relaxed and more confident and just more of an elite athlete having less of it. So if you just want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it happens everywhere. I think every program, every team at every level is going to have some level of this. Maybe not at like the highest level, like the major leagues. Um, but this is a very prevalent issue, is thinking too much when you're performing. And what the yips are, for people that don't know, it's basically a issue where you have involuntary movements that are basically negatively impacting where the ball is going. So if you're a pitcher, you don't really have a sense of where the ball is going. You feel like you can't control it. You feel like involuntary movements are happening, and there's two mechanisms for why this occurs, according to Tread Athletics, this article that they wrote. It was several years back. The first one is basal ganglia dysfunction, and focal dystonia, which is basically the emergence of involuntary movements that negatively influence like well coordinated, well timed athletic movement. And the second one is a fear of failure or fear of negative consequence, which is like a psychological issue. And this is what Bryce talked about with me on that podcast: is imagine going up on the mound and thinking, I'm trying to not walk this guy, as opposed to thinking I'm going to punch this guy out on 3 pitches and completely just dominate this guy. Yeah. That's the difference. And it's very interesting, the interplay between like the basal ganglia dysfunction and the actual brain activity part and the dopamine system, because the basal ganglia thrives off dopamine. Okay, so for anyone that doesn't know what dopamine is, it's a, what would you call it? Like a transmitter or a what would you call it?
I would just say it's like a chemical response that makes you very like almost addicted to that feeling, right? So I mean, we talk about it a lot, but like caffeine, for example, is right. You might get a dopamine hit when you're drinking the caffeine before you go lift.
Dopamine is like your reward system chemical, right? You feel a reward, and dopamine then is released. And it's crazy how motor learning and dopamine tie in. Like when you have a reward system that tells you like you did this thing well, or you were successful in executing it, you get a dopaminergic response, and motor learning is then amplified. And that's been studied. So I think a lot of the way that like practice is designed, sometimes like there's no reward. Like it better be perfect, and it's a fear of failure instead. Like, you got coaches yelling at you like, just throw strikes, or just do this, do that. Like, why aren't you this way? Like, that's not how you create a good mover. Because now all you're doing is you're raising cortical activity, and you're gonna slow down and hinder movement even more. Because you're gonna start to try to voluntarily control things and make it look pretty and make it perfect, and you're not gonna flow. So that's, I think, the more prevalent case of the yips is psychological, I feel like, and it's just a lack of not being put in sport specific environments. Because you want things to be perfect. Like, I used to play with guys like this all the time. Like, oh, I just want to throw bullpens and just throw heaters and just throw hard all day. And like, they can't execute in a game. Well, it's because you don't ever do stand-ins. You don't ever do live situations or scenarios where like you're in the bullpen and you're trying to come back from like a 2-0 count. You don't put yourself in challenging situations. So then when you find yourself in those in the game, you're struggling because you just want practice to feel good and you just want to do feel good reps all the time. And Bryce hit the nail on the head with this is like you have to be okay with some level of failure so that you can create a scenario where like a dopaminergic response is possible. You want to challenge yourself to a degree to where dopamine actually is going to be a part of the equation.
Yeah.
And then you can learn better and you can become a better mover.
Yeah. I mean, I do that all the time with my javelin throwers because we'll always try to work on one of Brett's favorite terms is we call it the donkey kick follow through, which is essentially just that trail leg when the back hip and the back foot fully internally rotate against the block leg. The back leg just comes up and follows through after the javelin. And when you're a lower level javelin thrower and you're worried about throwing through the point, throwing at the perfect angle, getting the perfect arm slot, getting it to fly nice, it's really hard for them to also think about their lower body. So that's where we have them do a ton of medicine ball drills and certain drills indoors where we're not even worried about distance. We're just going into a wall and we're taking video and going back and forth and working on them having that soft back foot contact to internally rotate their back hip and then get that donkey kick follow through. And it's just insane the amount of kids that I've worked with that have been able to have that drill with the medicine balls, not worrying about distance, only worrying about the lower body, but still trying to train in that sport specific movement pattern. And then when we go out and throw, say even like a couple months later, even if it doesn't click right away, then they are starting to throw and they're getting that lower body feel and that lower body power without even thinking about it because, like you said, they've trained it sport specific indoors or in the weight room or whatever, and now it just becomes like a natural byproduct of their training that is presented in the javelin throw.
Yeah, it's really hard to make mechanical changes and focus on something when you're doing the whole thing. Like you have to break it down and isolate different aspects of it. That was another thing I spoke on too with a course or a module that I did in the course about why general training matters and like how to make it feel specific. So like, with med ball throws, like you could say, oh yeah, very general movement, but it's like the perception action coupling of that. Like what are we trying to feel and what are we trying to isolate here? Like I think med ball throws are great for teaching a lead leg block and teaching like rotating around the front hip. So that's what we're going to cue athletes to do and feel and think about when they're doing this. And when they're doing a single leg RDL and they're creating relative hip internal rotation by going down and turning their trunk into their hip, like that's hip IR, like that's a lead leg block. That's accessing hip internal rotation space in a very general controlled sense. So I think you have to do stuff like that. You can't just bark at someone as they're practicing the whole skill. You got to break it down one piece at a time, and then when you put it all together, it seems to flow a lot easier.
Joe, did you play baseball?
I was a pitcher, so I was actually I converted from shortstop and third base to pitcher in my freshman year of college. I was recruited as an infielder, and we had two guys that went down, or one guy went down, and then another guy he was academically ineligible, so we needed arms, and they were like, "We got to see if you can pitch because you're not going to win shortstop or third base." Because I was competing behind two senior captains, so I'm throwing like puss balls, like literally 74, 75 miles an hour. And by my senior year, I was throwing like 92, 93.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's how I fell in love with this stuff, is just developing myself. I never had a strength coach in college, and pretty much everything that I, taught myself was stuff I was learning. I would watch tread athletics videos, driveline videos. I taught myself weighted balls. The lifting, I taught myself and wrote my own programs. Were they terrible programs? Absolutely. Did they get me better for where I was? Yes. But yeah, that was a very fun journey.
I asked just because you talking about the yips just reminded me of my whole baseball career. Like I've talked about it. I've talked about it before on the podcast, but it's we're in the Northeast. The practices are mostly inside. It's a lot of everyone wants to do feel good reps, and no one wants to crank the 40-year-old pitching machine to 80, 30 feet away. Like no one's touching it. And I would be curious to see if there's some type of study done or some type of trend of Northeast baseball players having a higher chance of obtaining the yips versus down south or out west, just because of us being more indoors, having the coaches be more like militaristic and screaming at you to make sure the practice is going the exact way you want it to go. And down south, I feel like they have access to outside facilities a lot more year round, and they get to play the sport a lot more live at bats and everything like that. So I'm just curious. I was wondering if that could even be a trend, if you be able to even track it. But
That'd be very interesting to look at. I have a feeling Northeast kids would deal with it more. I used to hate those indoor practices. The cage that we used to throw in was like only a couple feet like taller than you, and our catcher got the yips because he was like trying to like throw it in between the L screen and like the top of the
Oh
cage.
my God.
yeah, I had the yips a little bit for that too.
Like baby it back to us. I was like, dude, just throw it, let it hit the thing. I'll just pick it up. But
Dude,
yeah,
the worst.
those practices were terrible.
The worst as a catcher, though, was when there was no umpire and you had to call balls and strikes and receiving, and your zone is your zone, and you think it's a strike, and then everyone's just screaming at you from behind. Like, God, you guys aren't helping the case at all for either me or the guy pitching right now.
We also used the Rapsodo, so we had the artificial strike zone set up,
Yeah, see,
which was not always accurate.
No, we had nothing. We barely had a pocket radar sometimes. It was very, very low level, but it was also 10 o'clock at night Friday and Saturdays because they thought we would go out and party too much. So we had live ABs during the winter, Friday and Saturday nights at 10 p.m. to midnight.
We used to have 6 a.m. practices in January when we would come back, and we were like trucking through the snow to get to the indoor facility. It's like Massachusetts in January. I mean, it's like 10 degrees outside and there's
Oh yeah.
8 inches of snow on the ground.
Springfield and Mass. We had to. This is actually a funny story. Then we'll get wrapping up here, but it's January, February, and we're trying to get ready to use the field because it was a nice day out. But there was just like a thin layer of ice all around. We had a turf field, brand new, it was beautiful, but it was a thin layer of ice everywhere. So our coach had the entire team go out there and just stomp on it. And we would go from foul pole all the way to the foul pole and just stomp on the ice. And if that's not Northeast baseball, I don't know what else. I don't know what else there is to describe it.
It's insane. You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. It's hilarious, but it's why we're strength coaches now and we don't play baseball. So, I mean, one final question, right? Just to wrap it up. So, if you weren't doing what you're doing, and if you weren't a strength and conditioning coach, what do you think your profession would be?
I'd probably be a teacher. I think a lot of strength coaches say that,
Mm-hmm.
but I would probably be teaching kinesiology. I mean, I really like the science of kinesiology. I like exercise science. I also feel like I could probably teach like a philosophy course if I learned more about it and I was more well read on it. Like I just love thinking concepts. I mean, I catch myself thinking about like the world all the time and just like how things are and why things are the way that they are. I'm very fascinated with that, like how things come to be, why human behavior is a certain way. I'm very intrigued by that side of like the human condition and and our life. And I talk about that too in the course as well. Like I think a lot of philosophical ideas apply to what we do. Like I love Occam's razor says that the most likely explanation is probably the cause or likely the reason why. Like in you ever watch a crime show like Forensic Files, who do they look at as the first culprit for, a homicide? It's the people that are closest to that person. That's Occam's razor. Why? Because they are most likely to be in the same company as this person. So like with coaches, it's like I see a lot of people beating themselves up because maybe their team is losing or they're not seeing their efforts like result in any kind of wins or like on-field performance. And it's like, well, you're attributing way too much responsibility to yourself. You can be a really good strength coach, and at the same time, your team could be the worst team in the conference. Like I've said this on numerous podcasts, and I'll say it here too. I don't think that the program that I'm associated with should have anything to do with how people look at me as a strength coach.
Mm.
I like, and I don't even lead with that when people ask me what I'm about. Like, I don't like the fact that logos have so much to do with how people are perceived. You could be a really good strength coach and your team could be terrible. You could be a really bad strength coach and your team could be elite. So, just applying Occam's razor to strength and conditioning, like, we need to be careful about how much responsibility we give ourselves, because before you know it, we're not going to expect anything of other people. Like, if athletes are coming in fatigued all the time, it's not always your fault. College athletes are always going to be tired. The most likely reason for why that's happening is because they're college kids and they're stressed and they're not sleeping and they're probably not eating right. So, can you overtrain college kids with 2 to 3 45-minute sessions a week? If you can, your program must be like completely archaic and out of control crazy. Because I've never felt like I've been overtraining athletes ever. I rarely feel like I ever have to deload. I feel like I don't have enough time to even overtrain someone if I tried.
Mm.
So I think coaches need to kind of adopt some of these like thinking concepts and like truly understand how to think. So I'm very interested in that side of what we do.
I think that the same thing is true, and I know Tim Riley said this on one of his podcasts. I forgot which one it was, but he said how the same thing that you're saying about the team and the logo being associated with how good of a strength coach you are. He was saying the same thing to the follower account in today's day and age, being on social media. Like, just if you have a blue check mark and 100,000 followers and you're a strength coach, people will automatically think that you know what you're talking about or that you're legit, versus there might be somebody with no social media at all that might be more experienced, have more knowledge, have coached better athletes and made more progress with their clients, but just because they don't have that social media presence, so they're not getting the recognition, or people might not take them as serious, even though they might be more credible than someone with a bigger following.
100%. Yeah. It's a problem. And there's a lot of big voices that I don't know how much I would trust them to coach my team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely got to be careful of that. And I mean, I think that going back, reeling it back into your mentorship program, like getting a mentor in general or joining something like your coaching program is a great way for people to kind of just get in touch with that community and that reality of how coaches actually are, and getting a face-to-face mentor and having other people in the group to talk to as well. I think that's a great idea, because a lot of times if you're not putting yourself in those rooms with people that are older than you, smarter than you, wiser than you, then you could kind of become a recluse and just not really ever adapt, or never put yourself out there and never really truly know your full self-worth. Joe, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
I appreciate you guys having me on. This is great. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for tuning in.
And if you enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and review and share the show, because the only way that this show grows is if you like it, share it, and tell your friends and family about it.
New episode every Monday.